Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to a brand new movie review. I'm Chris Garner, joined today with Tayte in the Hour to give our review on Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, which is the 2018 sequel to the 2016 original, directed by David Yates, starring Eddie Redmayne, Jude Law, and Johnny Depp, and many other actors in the movie. There are quite a lot of characters in this thing. Unfortunately, we can't be joined by George today, who is kind of the resident Harry Potter fan on the channel. He knows all about the lore and everything like that, so it's a shame we couldn't get him on for this. Suffice it to say, he really enjoyed the movie. I think he ranked it higher than the first one. I think he enjoyed it a lot more, and he was pretty much positive across the board on the entire film. The same can't be said for me, alas. But before we get into our initial reviews and everything like that, if you want to go into IMDb and let people know the vague plot of this movie.
Yes, so the second installment of the Fantastic Beasts series, set in J.K. Rowling's Wizarding World, featuring the adventures of the Magi-zoologist Newt Scamander. That really doesn't reveal any of the plot to the film at all. Doesn't even mention the name Grindelwald. So I can understand why that would kind of turn people off seeing this film. Personally, for me, first impressions from this film were very mixed. I think George actually said it best when he said he could completely understand why people both loved it and hated it at the same time. There were definitely some scenes in this film which were very, very good within the Harry Potter franchise and within film just in general, and others where the film seemed to just kind of plod along at a very boring, monotone pace. As far as whether it was better than the first film or not, personally, I believe it has better moments, but I would stick it on par with the original upon further reflection. Both films so far haven't exactly proven how good you could have it with this franchise. It's not up to the standard of Harry Potter just yet, but we're getting very good glimpses of scenes that are up to, and one of them possibly beyond Harry Potter standards in general.
Yeah, and I think for me, I guess I should go into my opinions on the first movie. I watched the first movie as soon as it came out, and actually before watching this one, because it had been a couple of years, I did refresh and I did rewatch it the night before going to see this one, and I think it helped watching them back to back as kind of a two-part story of what's going to, originally intended to be a 5-movie series. I think that definitely helped. However, my opinions didn't wholly change the first time I saw the first movie. I still found it very underwhelming. I struggled to connect with any of the characters apart from, Dan Fogler? Is that his name? Dan Fogler's character of Jacob, who was the everyman. He was kind of the character that people connected as we entered this new Wizarding World again. So going into this movie was kind of mixed emotions for me, in that I hoped that this one could win me over. Hopefully it could take the characters in new, interesting ways and develop them and help me get more of a sense of identity from them, so that when we get into movie 3, 4, and 5, it's got me set up and I'm completely on board with these characters. And I'm not really so sure it did. And to me, the inherent problem with this movie, and we were talking about this movie before we hit record, is the name itself, Fantastic Beasts.
Yeah.
That definitely plays a part in the first movie. Obviously, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, it is actually based on a book that J.K. Rowling wrote. However, it was very, very small. I think it was a comic relief book she wrote along with Quidditch Through the Ages. Inherently, it's just a book about monsters. It doesn't have any of the same plot in this. Clearly, she's crafted it. She's worked it to go into the deeper lore of Harry Potter, and it's essentially become now a prequel series about Dumbledore versus Grindelwald. And obviously that's played up way more in this, as the title suggests. But it has ceased to become a Fantastic Beasts movie, in my opinion. And whilst you still get some, weird and wonderful creatures in this movie, they feel like they're arbitrarily having to put them into the plot now to justify the title of Fantastic Beasts. With the exception of one thing, which I can't talk about now, I'll say for spoilers, where they do kind of round it back into the importance of the creatures being in the movie and having a purpose, which I really liked. It does feel like we now need these big, bombastic moments where we do have these creatures which wholly don't mesh with the actual narrative the film's telling.
So interesting for me. They do have a tenuous, very, very tenuous link to the first film in the fact that the characters are the same, and there is, I'd say, one single beast that has a scene, basically a new beast introduced into this film. That actually does have relevance somewhat to the plot. Personally, for me, because I know that me and Chris have differing opinions, you have films where franchises need that name attached to it. So the Harry Potter franchise needed it to be Harry Potter because it was the adventures of Harry Potter himself. You look back at other series where you've got, I'm just looking at my shelf now, Kingsman. That was the story of the Kingsman Secret Service. However, you look at a film like the James Bond franchise where they're able to, basically, it isn't James Bond and and Goldfinger. It is just called Goldfinger. It is just called Casino Royale. It is just called The Spy Who Loved Me or From Russia with Love. That series doesn't need to have that name attached to it. Everyone knows in the advertising that it's going to be a Bond film. And all you really need for that is to just advertise this is the latest film in the Harry Potter universe. You don't need to call it Fantastic Beasts. In fact, calling it just The Crimes of Grindelwald would have been perfect enough. If you wanted to franchise tag it per se and have a tagline at the front, it should be Wizarding World. J.K. Rowling's own company, which she has set up, which she's managed to do with Pottermore, and what she's introducing all of the films with anyway in the opening sequence. So there's your answer right there if you wanted that. But personally for me, Crimes of Grindelwald, great title. Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald is a terrible title.
It's very, very clunky.
So bad.
I think I compared it to, and I'm going to go into a lot of comparisons to the Hobbit trilogy as well. It reminded me of the second part of that trilogy, The Desolation of Smaug, which is a very, very
great title. Amazing title. You put The Hobbit Desolation of Smaug and it's something completely different. It's almost overemphasizing what the film's about. It's trying to tie itself into the previous installment whilst keeping the trend going onwards. We don't watch the Marvel films and it doesn't always say Marvel's Iron Man. It was just Iron Man, and every single film, everyone knows it's a Marvel film. You don't need anything to say that it is attached to that franchise and attached to that kind of tag. You just need to mention what the film is about, which in this film, it isn't really the Crimes of Grindelwald per se, but it's definitely to do with Grindelwald. And the Crimes of Grindelwald sounds like a catchy enough title.
And more
I believe that was probably mistakes they've done with this film. Saying it was a big mistake is that it completely messes up the target marketing. Because if you hated the Fantastic Beasts film, you're not going to go see this film. And I know the first Fantastic Beasts film was very polarizing. So do you really want to have that attached to every single film that comes after and lose part of the Harry Potter fan base on every single installment? Or do you just want to say it's a new tale from the Wizarding World? It is a new tale from the world of Harry Potter, the world that we've created. It's to do with wizards. It's called The Crimes of Grindelwald. People go, oh, okay, I remember Grindelwald. He was a character in one of the previous films. I wonder what this film will be about. Because this film is nothing to do with Fantastic Beasts, but everything to do with Grindelwald.
I think it's just going with that bankable name, though, that we're talking about. Obviously, it's good to have a franchise with a name where you can have all the movies under one roof, essentially. So, oh, you okay, Tate? You good?
Sorry.
I'll continue. But yeah, going back to the title and everything like that and the actual concept of Fantastic Beasts, comparing to The Hobbit again, and I promise this will probably be one of my only other comparisons to that trilogy, is that you've got a question of tone. You've got a conflict of tone. In that Fantastic Beasts inherently, if you'd have just made one movie, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, you could have made it a very charming, whimsical, childlike movie, still setting the world of Harry Potter and the Wizarding World. It could have been about Newt Scamander trying to write his book and having to go out, maybe losing all of his creatures and having to go on this journey, meeting some people along the way and getting all of his creatures back. Just a fun little standalone movie like that. What we now have is that character and that concept kind of merged and awkwardly shoehorned into this pentology now, where it's essentially setting up a prequel for the Harry Potter franchise. It's no longer become like a Fantastic Beasts, on its own. It's become something more than that.
Can I point out the fact that this kind of series right now feels like a subpar kind of knockoff version of Pokemon? Because during the films, the first film was all about, oh shit, he lost all of his Pokemon and he's got to go and grab all of his Pokemon back and put them back in his suitcase to store them. The second film has him traveling the world collecting new Pokemon. But there's an evil villain with an evil organization that is starting to take away all the trainers. It's a very trivial thing, but I feel like the idea for this franchise right now is running a little bit dry. And they did introduce new characters into this film. I say new characters.
Oh boy, did they introduce new characters into this film.
They introduced characters which we've seen in previous Harry Potter films. They introduced Dumbledore as a younger person, which, as far as the first impression is concerned, I liked his performance. And I know that you didn't feel similar way that I'm going to say this, but I completely saw him as Dumbledore. I think the way that he voices his phrases, the way that he holds himself in his demeanor, his moral standard is exactly in place of where you would find Dumbledore in, I'd say, at least the latter films, the Harry Potter franchise. Not the first two with the original actor, but definitely the following ones with the actor, which I cannot name right now, but Chris might be on that checking that.
Sorry, which character?
The later versions of Dumbledore. So the later films that
Oh,
Dumbledore
so
was
you
in.
had Sir Richard Harris in Philosopher's Stone and Chamber of Secrets, and then Michael Gambon from 3 onwards.
It feels like a Michael Gambon
Yeah.
Dumbledore kind of that is reflected here. But honestly, I think that he brought a lot of levity to the plot where he came in. I feel like he's going to be important in the films going forward, which is pretty cool. But as far as introducing new characters, the best one by far is Grindelwald in himself. He was excellent. And I know that people have their reserved opinions about Johnny Depp, but honestly, this was a great performance.
Mm-hmm.
It was a menacing, kind of believable villain that you do kind of feel for in some cases. He had a demeanor every single time he was on the screen. The way that he spoke was almost seductive in some scenes where he was trying to get people to come to his own cause. And that truly does come across more of a threatening villain than Voldemort does, who basically just wants to rule the world and and kill this one kid on the way through. Grindelwald, as far as motivations is concerned, is excellently woven into the Harry Potter canon. And you see him as more of a threat than Voldemort ever was from one film alone.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I'll go back to Dumbledore first and talk about Johnny Depp afterwards. Don't get me wrong. I thought, without a question of a doubt, Jude Law and Johnny Depp were the strongest two people in this entire movie. I think we could have done with more Dumbledore, if I'm going to be honest. I really did like Jude Law in this movie. However, contradictory to you, I didn't see him as a young Dumbledore. I thought he was really good. I thought his performance was solid, but I didn't see him as a younger Dumbledore. Nothing about his performance or demeanor or mannerism screamed Dumbledore to me. He felt like, he felt like Jude Law to me, which isn't a bad thing. Jude Law's a great actor, and I think he was great in this. However, I didn't really get that quality of he is going to become the Richard Harris Dumbledore. He's going to become the Michael Gambon Dumbledore. On the flip side, we go to the antagonist then with Grindelwald, and I think that because they build him up in the first movie and he gets his ending in there, which sets up for the sequel, and he didn't disappoint. It is inherently still very much a Johnny Depp performance. He doesn't try to give the character an accent or anything like that. He is very much Johnny Depp. But I will agree in that you talked about Voldemort, in that Voldemort is a very black and white character. It's like, I am
very brash.
I am evil. Yeah. I want to take over the Wizarding world, kind of thing. All Muggles and everything we want to wipe out, which is a very similar goal to what Grindelwald has in mind. But I think it's handled much more intricately with Grindelwald. I think there's more of a morally grey area there.
I'd say Voldemort wanted to rule the world via chaotic means, whilst Grindelwald wants to rule the world through order. Getting people on his side first, instead of just going, I am chaos, I am destruction, I am blah, 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 blah. Grindelwald's way of doing it, and this isn't a spoiler or anything, but he actually kind of states it, that he doesn't want to be violent. He doesn't want to do it that way. He wants to be convincing, if anything. He wants to do it through convincing means, not violent means. And that is something you can kind of get behind. That is something that, especially in his message, there is one scene which we'll talk about in the spoiler section, which is fantastic and truly shows off his acting chops completely. Another character who I want to talk about as well is it Lita Lestrange, played by Zoe Kravitz. I didn't realize that was Zoe Kravitz at all. So that's on me for that. But her character was very well done, I'd say. Very well done. You immediately kind of gain a connection with her, and I know that's down to the directing of the first scene that she's in. Kind of draws you into kind of almost a friendliness with her. But throughout the film, you see her develop a reasonable amount. You find out a little bit more about her and herself. And towards the end of the film, she truly becomes a character you can actually get behind.
Yeah, no, I really like Zoe Kravitz in this movie as well. I think that we did get references to her in the first one, which helped reinforce her introduction in this second one. As you're right, you do kind of get the remember when we were kids together and did these things, that kind of
Yeah.
very trite sort of expositional dialogue, which establishes a friendship rather than seeing it actually play out on screen. You kind of told everything rather than seeing it. I would have liked that to have been dialed up a lot more in this movie. I thought she was great. I wanted to see more of her character, but beyond that opening scene, we really don't get any other, apart from flashback scenes, any inherent connection with her and Newt. And I think that you could have established that over a series of movies. I think it felt very rushed in this movie with what they were doing for a character and trying to set her up very quickly. And just talking about the characters in general, this is kind of a big criticism I have with the movie. I think it greatly suffers from character bloat. I think they introduce way too many characters into this movie. I think there are so many subplots in this movie, all going on at the same time. There's some characters that feel completely superfluous, like Nagini, for example. Nagini is obviously the snake, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes in the Harry Potter franchise. We now get a backstory for her and learn that she was actually a human and has some kind of blood curse, which turns her into a snake and will eventually keep her as a snake forever. Stuff like that just seems pointless. And inherently, if you lose the fact that Nagini is clearly fan service, it's a character people remember from Harry Potter, that is all she is in this movie. She doesn't serve any greater purpose, any greater plan, or anything like that. She doesn't really filter into the rest of the plot and becomes very much a background character. And I think that most of my criticism for this movie definitely stems from J.K. Rowling herself, J.K. Rowling's screenplay. I think it's very unfocused. I think it's very busy, very bloated, and it lacks that focus that the Harry Potter films did. As we said, like Harry Potter, you keep it to the, you got your main three characters, you've got Harry, Ron, and Hermione. You keep it mostly situated at Hogwarts, and as the year goes on, some dark menacing thing comes about and it finishes. You know, so that's more focused, whereas this is more sprawling and country.
I'll put out my personal opinion here, but my favorite two Harry Potter films, my favorite two, not the two which I think are the best, would be Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows Part 1. Deathly Hallows Part 1 purely because I actually like the idea of them traveling and hunting down the Horcruxes. And it was good because they were focused down on hunting down the Horcruxes. With this film, the main character has 3 objectives here, which is crazy. The 3 objectives are he has to look after and find out whose Credence's parents are, where his heritage is from. He has to hunt down and kill Grindelwald, and he has to look after and find more fantastic beasts. It's 3 different tasks for just the main character alone. And that's not even considering all of the side characters and their own subplots.
Yeah.
You have enough filler in this film to probably fill up a second Fantastic Beasts film and then do a Grindelwald film completely separate of that.
And I mean, let's count some of these other subplots as well. So you've also got Eddie.
So we're on Freeway.
You've also got his intrigue with his brother and the Ministry of Magic. Wrestling with that. That's another thing. You've got his the love plot with him and, is it the character of Ivy? Is it? When he's tracking her down and he's trying to get back to her and professes love for her, that's another
then
one.
You've got the Lita Lestrange subplot that she has with various different characters. You have the Queenie subplot with her love interest and Jacob, and that tying into Grindelwald and himself. You have so that's 7 straight off the bat. Without going into Grindelwald's own kind of subplot of gaining his supporters.
You've got Credence, you've got Nagini with him as well. You've also got that guy
Credence and Nagini.
And I guess we can't go into it, but there's also a revenge plot in the movie as well. There's a lot. There's a whole lot.
And then that's not even considering Dumbledore's subplot with Grindelwald. And okay, so we've just named 10 or 11, and we haven't even gone into spoilers there. Those are ones that are presented at face value during the film itself. And that is a crazy amount of things happening in a 2.5 hour long runtime. Not only that, but it leads you to question what they could do with the next 5 films, how bloated they're going to be, or whether they're going to be empty because they've used all the material in this film alone. And me and Chris were also discussing this beforehand. Don't get us wrong. I personally enjoyed the film, but it's one of those kind of enjoyments that comes with heavy criticism. It was a watchable film that I would definitely I'd probably watch it again, but only for the purpose of watching the entire franchise. I wouldn't go out of my way to go and watch it on personal effects again. But we were discussing this. The kind of way that it leaves the film, it feels like the Empire Strikes Back of this kind of pentology, because there's going to be 5 films, by the way, guys. We're on 2.
And that's a big thing with this movie, in that, and I mean, you and George saw it before me. I saw it a couple of days after, but you were completely right. You said by the end of this movie, it feels like the middle part of a trilogy. And I think you could have quite easily told this story in a trilogy. You don't need 5 movies to set up the entire feud between Dumbledore and Grindelwald. You really don't. That's a very simple plot.
There is a reason why most film sets are done in trilogies. In some cases, they have extended amounts of backstory. So, for example, the Marvel and DC Cinematic Universe, you could make 20 of those films in each of those, and it would still follow a coherent storyline. When you look at the Harry Potter series so far, it worked well because it was 7 books. Or, sorry, it was 6 books, wasn't it? Or was it
7 books.
7 books, 8 films. 7 books, 8 films. You have enough source material there to drive out all of those films to a perfectly fine runtime and have enjoyable adventures with them. The current screenplay that J.K. Rowling is writing off, it's Hobbit syndrome all over again. You have a tiny little bit of source material, and she expanded that out into what I feel like was a film and a half, because it was the first Fantastic Beasts film, and at least half of this film dedicated to these Fantastic Beasts. I cannot see a way that any Fantastic Beasts, other than the ones that Newt keeps as pets, to be part of this franchise anymore. The direction that this film takes is, for part of it, it is a Fantastic Beasts film. But for the main and sole focus of it, and the reason why people are going to go see this film, and the reason why people are going to stick with this franchise, is for Grindelwald versus Dumbledore, which we all know it's building up to. It's the 1945 battle, which is the only thing that's actually written down in text. J.K. Rowling has to write off. So currently, at this stage, you have a book and a half and 1 line worth of text to go off to make 5 films, to fill in those 10 years worth of stuff. And at this stage, she is rewriting over her own lore. It feels like a jumbled mess. David Yates, who's done very well with previous Harry Potter films, I'm sure the direction of this film was perfectly fine, but some of the editing choices were ridiculous. I'd say so, especially in the middle part, where they felt like they knew the film was going on for a bit too long, so they kept on doing heavy amounts of jump cuts without actually letting the scene develop or showing where the scene kind of started. You'd come into conversations midway through with relevant bits of information which would pop up later being left amiss. In the end, it felt like they understood that they'd done too much, and they just tried to slim it down as much as possible.
Yeah.
In all of this stuff, and they just managed to get off just the key, like only just the plot points that drives it forwards, and nothing that would actually settle in for the next few films to come. So you're left with an empty kind of feeling, because you think, we've got 3 more films here to fill. Maybe they're 2 hours long each. That's 6 hours, plus probably the extra bits. Let's talk 7 or 8 hours worth of film that we have left to watch in this franchise. What else do I actually want to see? Because I would be perfectly fine with seeing 2 hours more and just seeing the kind of end of what these kind of 2 films are built up to. That would make it a serviceable trilogy and make it perfectly fine. People don't tend to go for 5 film series. I don't know what she's actually trying to prove here.
She's proving that well, this was a big point of contention actually between me, you, and George. In that George believes she's got this all planned out. She knows these stories like the back of her hand, whereas me and you were arguing more for she is essentially kind of making it up as she goes along. Maybe, obviously, she has like the end point of Grindelwald versus Dumbledore, as he said, that's written down, that's set. And she probably has key moments, but in terms of getting to those moments, she's making these up in between, writing the scripts for them every year. I really do genuinely believe that. I don't think like she's sitting on completely written scripts for 3, 4, and 5. And to have 5 movies, I'm sorry, it does feel like a complete cash grab. It feels that obviously Harry Potter makes a lot of money. It's a very lucrative franchise. And as we've seen, like this had a higher opening weekend than the first movie did. Not quite as much as Harry Potter, but I don't know if this franchise is going to have the staying power for another 6 years, because that's how long it's going to be now. You get obviously 2 years between each movie. Another 6 years of this with these characters. Do I care? Do I really want to see this? And ultimately, we know how it ends anyway. Like Grindelwald we see him in Harry Potter. I think it's Deathly Hallows Part 2, I believe, or maybe Part 1, where we see the wand being stolen from him or telling someone where it is. We know that Dumbledore survives, at least until Half-Blood Prince. So it does suffer a lot from the prequel trap, in that we ultimately know the outcome with certain characters that are still alive. But yeah, no, I just think it's this film especially, and guess I'll go into my overall thoughts now before we go into spoilers. It's very overblown, and although we talked about all those side things, it feels like a movie chock full of stuff, but not much really happens. If you ask me to tell you what happened in this movie, to justify the running time, I really don't think it earns that. You said it best in that, I mean, after you came out, we were talking about it in that group chat.
Yeah.
You said it feels like a whole movie that's essentially like a metaphor for a chess game where nothing much happens. And then I argued at the end, then why should I be entertained by a movie where nothing happens?
So the exact quote that I said was, this entire movie could be replaced for an analogy of someone setting up a chessboard. All of the pieces are being put in place, but no one's making that first move. And that's exactly what this film was. The first Fantastic Beasts film actually had a coherent plot. You felt like some of the pieces were actually moving. You felt like there was a little bit fun. And the introduction of Grindelwald at the end was almost like the first check happening. This is someone saying, okay, that check didn't actually happen. We're just going to restart the entire board. And this film is them basically taking everything that they built up in the first film and putting the pieces back to where they started, just so that you can go forward with the next 3 films. I've seen a lot of people calling it like it's an advertisement for the next movie. It's loads of films fall into this category, and I give Marvel the biggest kind of middle finger for this one, because they are the kings of turning films into trailers for the next film to go on. I'm looking at you, Spider-Man Homecoming, Iron Man 3, some of the 4 films are just advertisements for getting the gang together and stuff like that. It feels like it's riding off nostalgia that it hasn't even built yet, which is crazy to say, but that's exactly where it's going at the moment. And once again, I want to say this again, because I do sound like I'm giving this film so much hard stuff. When we go into the spoiler-filled section, I'm going to point out the positive points. Because the negative points of this film basically are shown in the trailer, or shown in the exposition, or shown in the description for the movie. The actual positives from the film come from its surprises. So when we move on to that, I'll finally kind of compliment it for what it needs.
Absolutely. I just think this movie, for me, I agree with you. I think I enjoyed this one a lot more than I did the first one. Although you think the first movie is slightly better. Maybe it's more focused, the first one, but I still had a lot of problems with the first one. I think there's more going on with this one, although that's not particularly interesting, and it's clearly setting up for things to come in future films. The entire second act of this movie slowed to a crawl for me. I was actually bored during most of it. You've essentially got Newt just trying to find his lady love. You've got Jacob trying to find his lady love, and that takes up a bulk of the runtime. You have this set piece that you see in the trailer where it's like a carnival where we're introduced to other characters as well. And that really doesn't have much bearing on the movie. I think you could have completely cut that out and rewritten it in another way and still got to exactly the same end goal. The ending does set up in a very interesting place leading into the next one. But I said this for the first movie, and I'm sorry, I can't keep saying it. Each movie can't give the review from me saying that, oh, I think these might be good films once all 5 are said and done and I can watch them as an entire thing. Like, they have to absolutely hold up on their own. And so far, I feel like each movie's been a crutch for the next one. And I feel like this movie is exactly the same. Did I hate it? No, but I was completely ambivalent towards it. It didn't capture that magic that the Harry Potter films did for me. And I still really don't care about any of these characters. Am I excited to see where it goes? I guess out of obligation at this point, but that's mostly just the duel between Dumbledore and Grindelwald, who, as I said, were easily the best things in this movie. This franchise could have just been about like Jude Law and Johnny Depp and really develop that. I think the Fantastic Beast moniker is completely unearned now. And when we do get into movie 3, 4, and 5, I don't see how they're going to justify putting it in the movie, because it feels like there are greater, grander things at stake now besides finding whimsical, fun little mythical creatures. And
Yeah.
that's how I feel about the movie. So I guess that'll do it for our spoiler-free section. We're going to move into spoilers now. So if you haven't seen Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald and you are intending on seeing it, or you are interested in this franchise, please click away, go and see the movie, then come back to us, because we are going to spoil this entire thing now. There's twists and turns that we are going to explain.
Okay.
So that is final warning.
I have 3 major spoiler points that I want to go over here. I think you could probably guess what all 3 of them were.
Yeah.
First of all is the entire well, technically these 2 tie in together because it's closing off a little bit of a plot thread here. But I want to talk about the Boggle and the implications of that throughout the entire story.
The Bogart, you mean? Sorry.
That's the one. That is the one. I cannot remember the names of Harry Potter things. My knowledge is somewhere there. The Boggle. So basically, the Bogart, which from previous films it's basically a giant wardrobe. You open it up and it's your biggest fear comes out. For Lita Lestrange, we have this weird ghostly kind of sheep thing. And she's not exactly the most popular kid. And someone points out saying, oh, I can't wait for this because they're probably going to use it against her. But it's something that kind of mystifies you throughout the entire film. And it's something that stays kind of in the back of your mind. Like, it's one of those mysteries that are thrown up. Oh, God, what is that thing? That gets answered later when they're trying to find out who Credence's parentage is. And first of all, it's the whole kind of Dumbledore's brother being swapped at birth for another child.
Well, we don't know at that point that Dumbledore has another sibling.
Okay, but for the sake of this, we'll just kind of move on with that as well. So a child gets swapped at birth, and just so that she can get some peace and quiet, because the baby is crying a lot, and all of the pressure of that baby is on her. That is absolutely heartbreaking, but at the same time, absolutely pointless. Like, it's so completely pointless as far as the plot is concerned. It's a nice touch, and it's a haunting kind of image that it leaves you with. But it has a point later on, because it's obviously we find out that it's Dumbledore's brother who gets swapped. But I sat there at the time and went, wow, this is completely irrelevant. Like, she could have just said no without having to explain herself, and just say, like, she wouldn't have to explain herself. She didn't have to explain exactly what happened. She just said, no, he's not it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's sorted then. But I feel like they introduced something really cool there, and there could have been something more to it, but they didn't allude to it enough.
I'm going to have to watch that scene again when this movie comes out, because I will say how that scene was handled. For me personally, I found it very convoluted and very exposition heavy. You've essentially got a trio of characters all explaining about this one event, and it goes into all history, and they set up this entire explanation, and then she goes, no, that's not it. That's not the explanation. And it's like, oh, we'll backtrack.
It felt like people arguing with... It felt like people trying to figure out a Sherlock Holmes story from the TV show, BBC TV show Sherlock. So you have 2 people kind of giving exposition of, oh, so this must have been how it happens. And then the person who actually knows all the information basically reveals the revelation. And it isn't like everyone just kind of sits there with their mouths going open going, oh, okay, that's fine. And it has zero relevance of that time of the plot. Obviously, it has later relevance when we find out at the very, very end of the film. Mm-hmm. But we'll move through time-wise with the kind of spoiler points.
To me, that scene felt like I was reading a Wikipedia entry on a Harry Potter wiki. That's what it felt like to me, how it was handled. It was very exposition heavy. I was getting a little bit lost with the characters and how they're linked and everything like that. So I will have to watch that scene again. I get the gist of it, and obviously by the end, we know who it is anyway. Do you want to talk about the ending now? The ending twist?
I was going to say, should we go chronologically? So we got to go to the best scene from the film next. And dare I say, and this may cause some controversy, for me, this is my favorite Harry Potter scene, I would say, from all of the Harry Potter films. This scene was excellent. I think this is better than Always. This is better than any of the previous Wizarding fights.
The it's not better than Always.
That is, no, I am telling you this now. No, because Always...
Always was the culmination of a character we'd seen 7 movies previously and was incredibly emotional and hard hitting.
I don't care if it's all of the previous sum of its parts put together in this one moment. This one moment blows that out of the water.
I disagree
And I'll
with
say that from a visual perspective, the dialogue perspective, the speech that Johnny Depp's Grindelwald gives here to the wizards, the calm comfortness of it, the kind of the analogic, like the telling of the story itself, the illusion of World War II happening in the future and that being brought forward. Excellent. You're tying in a real world event finally to a Harry Potter film. I like that. And I feel like it brings more sense to the fact that there was a massive fight between Dumbledore and Grindelwald in 1945, the year the war ended. So that's going to have more effect on the next few films. But there is a sense of agreeing with Grindelwald to some extent. The humans are going to have another big war. What side are we going to be on? Or are we going to stand back and just watch it happen? Because if we join one side, we reveal ourselves, they're going to turn on us. And that's not good with the level of firepower that they have. So his message was, we must all stick together in this one kind of, through this one war, through this one moment. He said he wants to take over the world. He wants to rule it. But the reasoning behind that isn't because he hates humans. It isn't because he hates them. In fact, he feels like they should be given similar rights, or at least be given a say in their own, in Muggle affairs. And that is something that being brought forward in the Harry Potter universe that much. That kind of level of almost political kind of speech that is given here. But it's the sense that you know that he still has a reasonable amount of evil in him. He's a murderer. The way about he's going his actions is this. But you hear that, and then you see what is shown on screen in this film. And other than the opening sequence, he doesn't actually carry out any killings.
Which makes the title of this movie very, very problematic when you hear the Crimes of Grindelwald, in that you don't see really any crimes.
That's what I said at the start. What are his crimes? His crimes is freedom of speech.
Probably the most hard-hitting one is where the baby's killed from the French family, but even he doesn't do that. He kind of sits back and one of his followers do it. I agree. This is without a doubt the best scene in the film. I don't agree with you in that it's better than any moment from Harry Potter. I will disagree with you on that. However, I did think it was a great moment.
Chris, once again, he vapes out World War II out of a skull.
That was kind of dumb, but I appreciate that, you know, he did bring up that conflict that is going to happen, that kind of prophecy, that soothsaying that he does there to win people over to his cause. But I agree, like, Johnny Depp absolutely commands the scene. I don't think there's any soundtrack during that moment that I paid up to, because you're like the entire group gathering in that moment. You are listening to him, and he does have that very seductive quality that he draws people in with.
It's not just that, but it's also the moment where Newt's brother and the army of Auras kind of preparing to go in, and they go, look, we're going to go in, we're going to do this. And everyone else knows that it's a trap. Everyone else knows that it's not going to go down well. And we're left with a scene where basically it is Grindelwald, one man, versus basically 30 or 40 of the most kind of highest powered wizards of that time. The only person who you're missing there from that lineup is Dumbledore. He's the only other person who isn't really a main character who's been introduced here, who isn't in that scene. So you're basically Grindelwald and his power versus 30 to 40 different wizards of all high-powered wizards whose main goal is to track him down and kill him or get to him. And Grindelwald not only comes out on top, but he's able to turn a couple of people. Now, this is where my second kind of big kind of spoiler thing comes in. Queenie's change of sides. It's alluded to throughout the film. It would have been very well done. Notice how I said would there. If, and this is a big if it was done in the next film, not this film. If you see her going towards the blue flame and Jacob pulling her back and then them disapparating away, but then that having that lingering sense that she was going to change sides in her mind, the next film would actually have a plot to move forward with. You'd have Queenie struggling to decide between being basically shackled to the person she loves, not being able to truly love him because she can't be with him in the world that is built right now, or choosing Grindelwald and almost having that chance of giving herself more rights to be able to marry the person who she loves. This is a dumb decision, because if she truly loved Jacob, she would have stuck by him. because you don't have that development of the next film of her debating it, and you just have her turn without really having any debate in it, it makes it feel cheap, and it makes it feel like she never really loved him. She just loved the idea of him, the idea of being with a Muggle.
And I agree. And ultimately, her turn happens off camera. We don't see any of the interesting material where we see Grindelwald slowly breaking her character down. She goes to him, the camera cuts, we get other scenes, and then we get the revelation later.
And then she turns up at one of his rallies and says, "Oh no, let's stay. I want to see him talk." And she's already turned at that point.
It was completely,
she's turned at that point.
It was completely out of character to me, and the only other character I can equally compare it to, and I do think there are a lot of comparisons here, even down to their motive for turning to the dark side, is Anakin Skywalker from like Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. His change to Darth Vader, his fall to darkness, is done very, very quickly, and it's all spawned out about, I'm going to turn to the dark side because they can make me stay. They can give me the reasons to stay with my love. Obviously,
you turned her against me.
Yeah, literally, and that's what it feels like in this. That she wants to join with Grindelwald in that, he will allow her to be with Jacob and they can be happily together, and he's going to be the only means of bringing that about. And Anakin's obviously to try and stop his wife from dying in childbirth, and the only way to stop that from happening is the dark side. Got a lot of problems with that. I thought it was quick in Star Wars. I thought it was very quick for her in this one. I think you could have saved that for the third movie, in all honesty. And I see that with a lot of the plot points in this one we talked about earlier.
More levity, because this film has basically three twists and turns here that all reveal themselves towards the end. A film with twists doesn't have to have 10 twists. The best films with twists are the ones that have one or two. I'm thinking Usual Suspects. I'm thinking like the ending of Inception. You've got to think of tiny, tiny little twists. You don't need 3 or 4 huge kind of big bombshell that blows open the franchise as far as you know it, or blows open the film as far as you know it. You need ones that leave you with a good amount of impact. And sadly, all three of the big kind of bombshells that they drop leave zero impact because there was 3 of them. You just have the Queenie changing sides one. Maybe there'd be a bit more impact because, oh shit, she's turned sides. She was one of the good guys. Now she's bad. That's the big impact. Okay, cool. Or you have Credence's revelation of who his actual parents are. Or you have Leta Lestrange saying that she swapped the babies. One of those twists, you can have one, and that makes that film elevated towards the end.
Yeah.
You put 3 in there, and it's oversaturating it. You're left with almost a sour taste in your mouth.
Yeah, you have more time to absorb the twist and the change. Now, I will actually say the very end twist, the Credence revelation at the end of the film, this twist was hyped up to me to the nth degree. I was talking with George about the film, and he was saying that, oh, the end of the film is absolutely game-changing. It's lore-changing. It sets up for all this.
Hold on. I'll go off that. It is game-changing. It is lore-changing. But is that a good thing?
I'll agree, and I'll elaborate that more. But seriously, I think he denied saying this, but he did almost make it sound like it was one of the greatest film twists in recent memory. So I was going into this like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And I knew that the film was wrapping up. We just concluded the Grindelwald rally scene, and I knew that there was probably only scant few minutes of the movie left. And I was waiting for this huge bombshell, and I knew that it was going to end on a Credence revelation. But ultimately, your twist is just name dropping a familiar name. And that isn't a twist to me. That's just going, remember that name? It could have been anyone. It could have been absolutely anyone. You could have said, like, your name is Credence Snape. It could have been Credence Potter. You could have literally have dropped any single name in that moment, like Credence Black. He's related to the Sirius Black family. Any name in that moment, and the twist would have been exactly the same as it was. The fact that it's a apparently unknown, undiscovered Dumbledore sibling is completely irrelevant. It doesn't really change the stakes of anything. Because ultimately, and the way I see it is that Grindelwald needed Credence because he was an Obscurus, he was an incredibly powerful entity, and the only entity that would allow him to beat Dumbledore, because he and Dumbledore created a blood oath where they can't harm each other, and they loved each other in a previous life. That's all you need. Credence is a powerful force. He wants to use him as a weapon, essentially, whilst also pretending under the guise to care for him and be like a father mentor in his life and everything like that. That's all you need. The fact that now that like Credence is a Dumbledore relative, that might make it hard for Dumbledore to fight his own brother or something like that. You already had a moment where Dumbledore is like in turmoil and conflict about killing Grindelwald because of his connection to Grindelwald. By throwing another connection in there for him to go up against with a brother, it seems too much for me. You could have literally just left it at they were ex-lovers, they had a bit of a falling out, and they care about each other deeply on two opposite sides of the spectrum, essentially, but they need to find a way to beat each other through ulterior means. Dumbledore has obviously Newt Scamander, and he's going to help him create that, whereas Grindelwald's got Credence. And obviously, because Newt Scamander cares about creatures and fantastic beasts, technically Credence is, because he's an Obscurus, so he's going to try and work out that way. I don't think you needed that twist in there to be a Dumbledore
look, the way that this film ended makes you think, oh, okay, please tell me this is the end of Newt's story, because Newt is now irrelevant to the part. The entire story now is Dumbledore versus Grindelwald. That's what this film should have been. That's what this film series is going to have to go forward with. Newt is now a side character in this franchise.
Yeah.
He was the main character, but his relevance has completely dropped off with this one film.
Very much like Bilbo in the Hobbit trilogy, where other things take over.
I know, because in the Five Armies, it's all to do with dwarves.
Yeah,
he's barely in it at all. Like it's dumb.
Because other things are given more focus in the story. It has ceased to be, and this ties back to what we said earlier many times in this review, it has ceased to become a Fantastic Beasts movie, Fantastic Beasts franchise, and has now become a Harry Potter prequel trilogy surrounding Grindelwald and Dumbledore. You could have had your standalone Fantastic Beasts movie. If she is trying to create this huge, spin-off series now with Harry Potter, she could have done one standalone Fantastic Beasts movie. She could have done a Dumbledore Grindelwald trilogy, prequel trilogy. She could have done a Quidditch Through the Ages standalone movie.
I think if you're splitting, you got to split out these 5 films. I reckon you've nailed it right there. You need a Fantastic Beasts film, one film that tells this tale of Fantastic Beasts. Maybe end it with, I don't know, if you really want to throw a callback like that, maybe end it with one of the original 3 characters, probably Hermione, kind of reading the book to her kids. That would be like, it'd be a fun callback.
That would be kind of arbitrary, but if you save it,
it'd be arbitrary, but
ties it in.
It at least ties it into the Harry Potter universe in that sense. Then you do a Grindelwald trilogy. You don't do 5 films, you do 3. With those 3 films, you maybe start with this film. You can include Newt in it. You can say that Newt is an advisor to Dumbledore, and Newt is sent on this adventure to go and collect these things. As soon as he gets that vial, the thing that connects Dumbledore and Grindelwald, it then suddenly becomes Newt becomes a side character, and I'm okay with that. I'm completely okay with that. It's a callback to a previous film, the Fantastic Beasts film, shows that he is actually connected into this universe. For that final film, you've got one extra film. I don't think you do a Quidditch Through the Ages film. I think you do a Quidditch Through the Ages game. And you make that into an amazing thing where you can have it with different Quidditch teams throughout the ages as an actual video game.
This is just my hope of like an 80s sports movie inspired Quidditch movie in the same vein as a Karate Kid movie or like Mighty Ducks or Teen Wolf or something.
And I'm going to go ahead and say this now. I don't like The Cursed Child. I think it's a really shitty plot. It's won awards, but that's from hyper nostalgia. You actually talk to people who have seen it or at least read the script. It's awful. It's absolutely garbage. And she's been slated for it by a lot of the Harry Potter community. I'm going to throw it in there. You need to do a Cursed Child film. It's a garbage plot. It's a garbage thing. But it is connected into that universe already. It does follow on from the original Harry Potter series, and you make a couple of adjustments, and it's a perfectly serviceable film that continues on the legacy that was set before it.
I think as well, like if you get once they've got this 5-movie series out of the way, will it have actually been close to 19 years since the time jump at the end of Deathly Hallows? So I think absolutely we'll get a Cursed Child. Oh God, if this wasn't even a trilogy, what's Cursed Child going to be? Is it going to be a 2-part series, 3-part, 5-part again? God knows. Or maybe it'll be another 7 parts or another 8 parts, and it'll do like Harry Potter's kid all the way through like another generation. I don't know. We've had a comment saying if Credence's revelation of being a Dumbledore sibling turns out to be a lie, who do you think Credence's real family would be? If it's all been a ruse by Grindelwald in order to bring him to his side?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say I predicted that it was going to be Rey's parents were going to be no one, and I'm still happy about me being the one who predicted that. I'm going to go ahead and say that it's definitely someone within the universe. I'm going to say he's a Lestrange. I still think that he's part of the Lestrange family, but I don't think he is of the sister and brother who we saw. Because the Lestrange family has various different branches, like the Black family and stuff like that. So I still feel like there's going to be a connection there, but I don't think it's going to be closer to Leta Lestrange and her brother.
Yeah. I just have two very, very slight things to say before we round off, because we've been going quite a while on this particular review. Yeah. And this is probably in the lore, and I haven't understood it or haven't seen it. One thing that I get confused about is how long wizards live for in this franchise. Now, obviously, we have Nicolas Flamel in this film. He's an alchemist. He's essentially immortal. You do get a very brief glimpse of the Philosopher's Stone as well in a cabinet when he opens that up in the movie, which obviously ties into Philosopher's Stone with his link with Dumbledore as well. But I don't know how long wizards live for. Do they live conventional lives? But I don't think that adds up with how old Dumbledore would be. If you are a wizard, are you blessed with longer life? I don't quite get how that works. Or is it just select few bloodlines of wizards dating back to like ancient wizards have longer lives? There was that. And also one of the other things is it's mostly the second act of this movie where they have that, was it a Chinese, I think it was a Chinese monster, wasn't it? The lion, Chinese dragon looking thing that they're trying to capture in the second act of this movie. Was that set in a wizarding community, or was that set in our conventional Paris at the time? And was it just people going to like a quote unquote freak show and seeing these magical occurrences? Because when there's like a giant lion creature running around, I was thinking if this is set like in like a normal residential area, how do they not know about wizards and creatures and things like that? How is it kept a secret? Or I can't remember, did they enter like a kind of Diagon Alley, but on a bigger scale of like a subsection of Paris?
I think they're in a Diagon Alley subsection of Paris, but at the same time, and this is a problem with Deathly Hallows Part 2, because it's one of my least favorite Harry Potter films in various different reasons. I really disliked it. I think it was a terrible end to the franchise. The dragon sequence that completely destroys part of Diagon Alley, you would have still been able to see that, because it's not like Diagon Alley's big buildings are hidden from the city. It's the kind of the illusion that it's there, but it still isn't. It's part of London. You wouldn't be able to disguise a dragon flying through the fucking skies of London, would you? Yeah. Of course not. And same with this creature running around Paris. There's no way you're going to be able to hide it or disguise it.
And then the dragon just flies off at the end. Like, that is still in the UK somewhere. That is still very much at large. Like,
yeah, and it's just like the whole point of hiding magic things from the Muggle world. Some things are very much out in the open, like the Dementors, which you see in the fifth Harry Potter film, where you've got the opening sequence with Dudley.
But that was an unknown occurrence. That like completely took everyone by storm. Even the wizarding world, they didn't know why Dementors would show up in an area like that. They do say that in the book and the film.
Yeah, but showing up in an area like that, the fact of the matter was that he could still see them.
Yeah.
And it means that there have been magical occurrences where humans have been able to see them in the magic world. I mean, throughout every single Harry Potter film, I swear there's at least one occurrence where a no-mage or a Muggle sees a wizarding kind of thing happen. So it comes to the stage where you start to kind of think that either the universe is flawed or the writing for the universe is flawed. You get to, it's one of those, once again, you get to pick one. And I'll conclude this kind of review on the fact that I don't know where J.K. Rowling is going to take it from here. She's rewritten her own lore. She's taking a direction where some people will enjoy, others won't. I'm in the party that is firmly in the middle of that. And we're left with the Fantastic Beasts tag still being stuck on this film, even though by all means and accounts, there shouldn't be any Fantastic Beasts other than Newt's pets, maybe, in the next film. And in that case, it should have been called Newt Scamander and the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find More, and Newt Scamander and the Crimes of Grindelwald. Yeah. And that would make more sense.
I'd mentioned earlier at the beginning, in spoiler-free, there is a moment at the end of the film that does sort of reinforce the point and the purpose of Newt Scamander and his creatures having a point in the plot, in that his little kleptomaniac echidna pet that he has does steal the item that's essentially like the linchpin of this new franchise that's going to help them out. So,
what you mean the MacGuffin?
The MacGuffin, yes. The echidna steals the MacGuffin of the movie, which was completely predictable. Like, as soon as it jumps out of his pocket, you knew exactly where that was going. At least I did anyway. And then Dumbledore does kind of have a speech where it's almost like Lord of the Rings, like, even the smallest person can change the course of the future kind of thing. So I liked how they did sort of reinforce in that moment that the beasts have a point, but that's a very small moment in a very long movie, and there are a lot of beats in this movie involving the beasts that feel like they're in it just in order to get there.
Yeah.
You have that character who's his helper at like Newt's base, essentially, where there's that sort of, is it the Kelpie or whatever it's called, like seaweed horse?
Is she in love with him?
Is she in love with him? Does she feature in the rest of the movie? No, she's in the intro, and that's it. We didn't even see her in the first movie. She's a brand new character, completely dropped. There's a lot of sort of plot to cul-de-sac. Sorry, there's character bloat in this movie, and a lot of the plot points, when they do have a point, feel incredibly rushed, such as Queenie's turn to the dark side, and some other things as well throughout the movie just seem very rushed. Zoe Kravitz's character as well, for example. So that'll do it for my overall thoughts, at least.
You shall now be known as Darth Queenie.
And as well, like, Jacob was my favorite character in that first movie. I felt he was completely wasted in this film. He really didn't have anything to do. He's sort of just a totem for Queenie's change at the end, and that's really all his character serves. I think that. And I swear to God, I remember reports coming out when the first movie was all said and done and they were planning the second one that he wasn't going to feature in there. And then I think the plot was reworked to bring him back because obviously he was a character that everyone loved and connected with. And I'm glad that he is in the movie. A lot of the characters don't have anything to do, including Newt Scamander. And that's a problem when your main protagonist of the movie is kind of rendered inert or superfluous in your main film. So I don't know where the future of this franchise holds. I don't know if it will still continue to connect with its audiences. Will people still be enthusiastic about this franchise 6 years down the line as they were about the Harry Potter films? I don't know. I really honestly don't know. Maybe once all 5 movies are said and done, they will be a better whole than they are individual parts. But that shouldn't be an excuse for a poorly made movie, poorly written film.
You can have a series of films that don't have a dull note to them. The Harry Potter franchise is the perfect model of that. Like, even though I didn't like the last film, it was still a serviceable, entertaining film. It had its merits. It had its good points. The entire first series of Harry Potter, all of the films, worked out really well. There wasn't one film which you would point out and go, that film was shit. That was a terrible film. The
only one I didn't like, and obviously you said it's one of your favorites, to me was Half-Blood Prince, because it does feel like that bridging movie. It feels like a lot of the points of this movie in that you can't really watch Half-Blood Prince without then going on to Deathly Hallows. It felt very much like that connective tissue, that bridge movie between Order of the Phoenix and the finale. So that's the only one I'll have an exception to. But
it's funnily enough, out of all the Harry Potter films, that one has the largest amount of character development.
Yeah.
And that's why I liked it, because they actually finally fleshed out the characters of Harry Potter a little bit more. Instead of having them going on,
I think Deathly Hallows Part 1 probably has more.
Instead of them going on adventures, this is one of them very grounded and kind of living with the idea that they are pretty grounded and they have to develop themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all down to personal preference. But yeah, I've said everything I can on this review.
And this might be one of our longest reviews in recent memory, at least. This feels like
it's an hour. It's 1 hour on the dot almost.
But there's a lot to talk about, you know, and we've talked about and speculated about the future of this franchise as well. But that'll do it for our review on Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. Be sure to comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought of this movie. Did you like it? How would you rank it compared to the first and the greater Harry Potter world? What are some of your ideas setting up for the future? But obviously be mindful that some people probably watching this haven't seen the movie maybe. So please do have a spoiler warning in the comments if you are talking about that. We will be going live later for another episode of Film Club, and also November is a completely packed month for movies. We've got more movies coming out next week. We've got a new Robin Hood movie on the way. We've got Creed 2. So I think this weekend I'll be going live with my friend to give a Rocky Saga review. It's going to be one big video. We're going to talk about all 7 movies in the current Rocky franchise. So look out for that. There'll be trailer reactions from me along the way when big trailers come out. A lot of stuff happening with the channel, so please hit that bell icon. Please hit the subscribe button. And until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you to everyone, by the way, in the side chat that's joined us and watched our review. You guys are amazing. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.